All right. Hi, this is Laurel from the Seagull Nest. I am talking to Julie Brill. She's an IBCLC and she is owner of wellbreastfeeding.com and wellpregnancy.com. And I'm going to pass the torch to Julie.
Hi, Laurel. Fun to be here. I am an IBCLC, an International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. We're the clinicians that help people with breastfeeding and chest feeding. And I'm also a childbirth educator and a doula. I've been working with families since 1992.
That's really amazing. What got you into this, Julie?
That's funny. I took a class in college on the Amish, and we read the midwife story, which is the story Penny Armstrong as a midwife with the Amish in Lancaster County. This is like pre-internet, like 1992. And I didn't even realize there were still midwives. I got all excited. And by luck or chance, there was another student in the class, a grad student who was studying to be a midwife. So she connected me like in the blink of an eye with the midwifery community at the time. And my senior year, I took the Mass Midwives Alliance home birth course alongside my college work at Tufts. And from there, I just started attending births. I got certified as a childbirth educator and just like felt like what was meant to be.
That's really amazing. And it's so interesting the way things fall into place like that.
It's wild. You know, I train childbirth educators and labor doulas, and it's amazing how many people come with a story that's like, they just got put on the path, or they tried to get off the path. They got pushed back on the path. I mean, it really is a calling for a lot of people.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I have been a professional nanny for a very long time. And over time, I've moved more into the postpartum world. And I feel more and more at peace. And this is my place. This is where I feel more comfortable. And it's just so interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting. You know, we think about callings as, you know, artists get called to things, but I feel like people really get called to birth and postpartum work too.
Yeah, it's really a great feeling to, at least from my perspective, to know that I'm making a difference and I'm helping somebody to have a positive experience in their postpartum journey.
100%. It's all about that parent-baby bond. You know, if you get in there in pregnancy or in the early days postpartum or in labor, you really can help kind of fix it before it even is broken, you know?
Yeah. And with you doing this for so long, you must see so much and must have so many stories and so many memories, both positive and negative, that have shaped you into who you are. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen a lot of changes. I know when I started in the early 90s, the midwives who've been doing this work for a long time, they were lamenting the cesarean rate, and it was 20%. And now we think, oh, we can get it back down to 20%. Like that would be a beautiful thing. You know,
right
now.
I'd love to hear what you do as an IBCLC and what kind of families you work with and help. And I'm sure the viewers would also like to hear that.
Yeah, so if people aren't familiar, International Board Certified Lactation Consultants are the clinicians for breastfeeding. There is sort of an alphabet soup out there in terms of people helping parents to feed their babies, which is wonderful. We need a lot of support, probably more support than is actually out there. So there are CLEs, which are certified lactation educators. There are CLCs, which are certified lactation counselors. There are other ones. But the IBCLC is sort of the gold standard in terms of providing clinical care. So like for my certification, I did 1,000 hours of hands-on learning, and then also 90 hours of breastfeeding education and 14 college courses. And then I sat the international board exam. So I just mention it because sometimes people get into a place with feeding their babies that they really need clinical help, and they feel like there's no solution because they've already got that help. And in fact, they might not have. So often in the hospital and postpartum or in a pediatrician's office, the lactation consultant or the lactation nurse isn't actually an IBCLC. So good to reach out for an IBCLC if you feel like you're struggling or you're not getting the answers you need.
Are you able to go into the difference between an IBCLC and a CLC? Because I see that a lot. And honestly, being in the field, I don't even know the difference.
Yeah, so the IBCLC, like I said, there are 3 different tracks, but I have the track that was 1,000 hours, we have the 14 college courses and the 90 hours of lactation education, and we sit an international exam. The CLC, I don't exactly know how they're doing it virtually in the pandemic, but traditionally it was a 45-hour class. So people would start on a Monday, they'd work through that week full time, and on Friday afternoon, they'd take the test. So they have, some solid learning, but they don't have the kind of learning. It's just not comparable to what we have done. And some CLCs do it as a stepping stone to being an IBCLC, which is great, or they do it because they want to teach classes, or they're doulas who want to work with families and have a little more breastfeeding knowledge. But it's not really comparable, even though the letters sound the same.
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying, because honestly, being in the field, I was like, I don't know the difference. So I can imagine that people not in the field don't necessarily know the difference.
I think parents find it very confusing.
Yeah, I can imagine. As an IBCLC, are you able to diagnose lip ties, tongue ties, and cheek ties?
So that's a great question. It feels like it's impossible to have a conversation about lactation without talking about oral ties. So the short answer is no, only a doctor can diagnose. What we do is an oral assessment. So we're assessing the fee. We're the clinicians who have the time and expertise to do that. And then many of us have actually gone out and done additional training on how to do an oral assessment. So I do that with babies if there's any concerns, and oral exercises. So ideally, we're starting the parents working with the baby before they ever see a laser dentist for release, starting these oral exercises, getting comfortable in the baby's mouth. The baby gets comfortable with them being in their mouth, and we start to really change the tongue and the baby's connection between the tongue and the brain. If people just rush in for a release, they'll change the structure, but do nothing for the function. And sometimes that leads to a lot of frustration. Parents who think it's like a magic wand if they just go in and get the release. So much better to start with an IBCLC. We'll do the feeding assessment and the oral assessment, which we can give to the laser dentist. We can refer out for body work, which is another important step, and then refer to the dentist as well. So it's really like a three-legged stool, a team working together to get this baby on track.
And you just mentioned body work. So what are your feelings on body work? Like, I, as about to have a new baby, intend on having our son adjusted and going to the chiropractor, and we already have a chiropractor in mind for him.
Great. Yeah.
And my wife, whom is pregnant, she's doing prenatal visits with the chiropractor as well. So you mentioned it, and it's a great transition into that. What is your feeling on it?
I love body work. We had a pediatrician that came to the house when my kids were born in 1996 and 99. So they're adults, but we had a pediatrician come to the house. The first place we went out was for body work. So if you think about it, pregnancy is it's awkward sometimes with the parent, but it's awkward for the baby. They can be in a position that's not exactly symmetrical, or they can be in a breech position. They can be posterior, so they don't have their chin to chest. All kinds of things can happen. They can be asynclitic. Then you have labor, which is its own intense thing, and the birth process, or cesarean birth, where they don't get to go back and forth under the pubic arch and come out in extension. So all kinds of things can happen. I refer babies to body work all the time. The cesarean born baby who sometimes struggles for extension, but also the baby who was born precipitously, the baby that comes out in 2 pushes that doesn't get to do that extension on the way out. Twins who don't have as much room to move around, the breech baby, the posterior baby. If people are working with an IBCLC, usually there's a reason. They have concerns about feeding. That's what we do. We help with those concerns, and often the body worker can help with that as well. It's funny, I had a baby a couple of years ago. Both the parents were chiropractors, and they also took this baby. The baby had their own chiropractor, and that baby had the most beautiful extension, because what we want them to do at the breast is look up, right? And I had sort of like an idea of how baby should be able to do. And then I saw this little baby. I can't even do what this baby could do. I mean, it's like beautiful extension. The bar got raised so much in terms of what's possible. And of course, the more they raise their chin, you can feel it in your own mouth. If you look up, your tongue comes up, and we very much want that elevation. when they're feeding. So often at the breast, they're kind of tucked like this.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, move them towards their feet, Laurel, when you see that. Want this as an open angle.
perfect. I definitely need more breastfeeding education. I feel like we can never get too much education. I love to learn.
I agree. And I feel like with breastfeeding, it's just changing all the time. You know, on the board exam, some of the wrong answers are the old right answers. I mean, things that
Right.
parents, things I was told that are just wrong, you know.
I was actually reading on a doula Facebook page this afternoon about some outdated techniques that used to be used and now
Right.
are horrible and quote unquote horrible and just really
Or still are
outdated.
used.
Well, yeah. And it just made me, it was so interesting. Like everything around us is constantly changing. And in every field, there are always people who aren't up to date on the new methods, and there are people who are. And it's just, it's again, so interesting. Like, and yeah, I love to learn, and clearly you do too with all of your acronyms. And it's just, it's lovely. Maybe we will start to finish up, but what is your, can you give one piece of advice to a struggling parent as an IBCLC?
Somebody who's struggling with breastfeeding.
Yeah, let's say a frustrated, struggling new parent who is struggling with breastfeeding and needs to know someone is on their side.
Yeah, I mean, I love that question. I mean, I think two things come to mind. One is just try to find a place, and it's hard when things are not going well, where you can center yourself. So, you know, the baby entrains to the parent. If the parent is anxious and worried, and why wouldn't you be if it hurts every time you nurse the baby, or you're worried the baby's not getting enough to eat, or you can't get the baby latched, right? Those are really stressful things. But when the parent is sort of swimming in that stress, the baby responds and they become more stressed, and that's a cycle. So anything you can do to get out of that stress cycle, a hot shower, go outside, take a nap, you know, have something healthy to eat, talk to a friend, just to try to like break out of that cycle where everybody is really stressed. In terms of actually getting feeding assistance, I would suggest reaching out to an IBCLC. And sooner is better than later. I mean, I suppose that sometimes those problems can resolve, but there's the potential for them to become more complicated. So you are the expert on your baby. If you feel like things aren't going well, definitely reach out, find an IBCLC who you can work with.
Perfect. That's a great
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, Laurel.
And,
so fun to do this.
Yeah, it's been really wonderful. Again, if anyone wants to be in touch with Julie, her website is wellbreastfeeding.com, and her name is Julie Brill. Thanks, Julie.